Thank you. It's great to be here. This is a real important discussion, and I'm really happy to be part of this conversation. The discussion of how do we make our environments as secure as possible is an important one to everyone in the industry. And in my opinion, and I think increasingly in opinion of security practitioners around the globe, there's a need for certification and standards in order to have a backdrop that defines what good is. Let's be frank. We have lots and lots of security requirements. We have lots of regulations, compliance initiatives, and yet the reality of it is everyone still gets owned. And the question is, why is that? And that's because we don't have reasonable frameworks that everyone is adhering to in order to make sure that the security posture of all the environments that knit our world together are strong enough to meet the challenge. So in this session, I'd just like to discuss with you how important the work is at the MEF, specifically related to edge security, security generally, for the connectivity of the way that the world is evolving from a zero trust perspective. When we look at sort of the backdrop, why is the security challenge such a big one? Why is it so important that we get it right? First and foremost, I think none of what I'm going to say here is very controversial, but the application landscape has evolved in a very rapid way. Applications and their components that stitch them together are deployed everywhere in a highly distributed manner. And so the security policy frameworks that are used to ensure that those environments are running in a way that we expect them to are more difficult to attain the more distributed the problem is. Moreover, it's not just that the applications themselves are distributed, it's that we've connected everybody. And so we have a global user population that is connecting to everything and demanding that their interactions are secure and that bad things don't happen to them because they're online. There's a requirement and a scale to understand the security policy frameworks of everything that we build that's just really unprecedented in our history. And we've been following this evolutionary path for a number of decades now, and I think we'll always have the arms race with us. The bad guys have a real monetary incentive to succeed, and we have a real monetary incentive to make sure that we meet that challenge and secure our environments. The threat landscape is tremendously complex. The bad actors themselves, in many cases, state actors, have vast resources to bring to bear on the problem of how to compromise environments for monetary gain or political gain. And so we in the community that are building out all of the solutions that connect everybody together, we have an obligation to work together because no single organization is going to be able to meet that challenge. And unless we have a common rubric of what it means to secure our environments, it's going to be very difficult for us to work together in a meaningful way that allows us to build high efficacy security controls into our environments. I've been doing this for 20 something years. The challenge constantly changes. It's a very energizing place to be. And if you take anything away from the session, it's that in order for us to succeed, we have to act as a community. I'm really grateful for the MEF and for the activity and the initiatives that exist in that environment to drive us towards standardization of the way we connect things and the security frameworks that are mapped to the various elements of the way that we build out the internet as a whole. Today, I'm going to get into some discussion of some areas that are formally available in terms of standards from a security standpoint and a certification standpoint, namely SD-WAN. And then the evolution of that in the security landscape to SASE, which is Secure Access Service Edge, which is sort of the next trend line that we are all as a community following on as we move towards zero trust environments that allow really profound and granular security policy to be deployed on a per user basis, on a per workload basis, on individual components of the system. And I think it's tremendously gratifying for us as a company to be a participant in the development of those standards, to work with the carriers, the telcos, the developers of security equipment, other test providers like Spirent. It's a very robust and highly engaged environment. And I'm hoping that if you take anything away from this, it's that you want to join us and help make sure that we get these standards correct, and that we take the high ground and we start to push back against the bad actors that are constantly trying to compromise our environment. When we look at the challenges of the landscape, first and foremost, as all of you know, we've long viewed security as something that's associated with large, heavyweight, high-power appliances that act as intermediaries in the middle of the connections, and they scrub all the bad stuff out. That doesn't work in a cloud world, and I think we all know that now. And what's changing is that those security functions, whether it's a firewall function, data leak protection function, an intrusion prevention function, all of those capabilities are being distributed in virtual ways as cloud functions to more places, closer to the workload, closer to the user, in order to provide tailored and very specific security, almost on a flow-by-flow basis. But that's very difficult to deploy. It's very difficult to manage without some kind of certification that allows us to work with a common rule book of how things are supposed to behave and how security should be applied against the ever-changing threat landscape. One of the major focus points of the discussion of security is this notion of it moving to the edge. And when you talk about security moving to the edge, you have to define the edge, because folks use that terminology to mean many different things. For me, the edge is a boundary between one security domain and another. And I myself represent a boundary with my iPhone in terms of how I want my security to be contained for me. I don't want that to be centralized in a way that is managed by some other entity. I want it to be specific to the tailored needs that I have and all the applications that I use, whether they're business applications or personal applications. And there's a requirement for us to understand how to deal with that granularity in a meaningful way, and we need standards to do that. One of the other things that has happened is that the security landscape is moving to the cloud. And as the security functions themselves are deployed in the cloud, particularly from an enterprise perspective, we lose something that we used to have in the large appliance model. We lose control over the infrastructure. Yes, an AWS or an Azure or a Google Cloud Platform can provide great security, but they do so in a way where much of the infrastructure that deploys that is opaque. You get to choose what kind of policies and controls you want to implement, but you get limited visibility about how that actually operates under the covers. And so when you lose visibility, you need some kind of a mechanism in order to allow you to be able to test the efficacy. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if we standardize what that security efficacy looks like for all of the critical applications that we want to deploy in that manner. Finally, one of the real benefits of having a standards backdrop is that as the security problem gets more and more distributed, it becomes very difficult to determine who's at fault when something goes awry. What do I mean by that? Well, it could be that the user is using or improperly using credentials. It could be that the security control that's deployed at the edge of their network in their enterprise environment is misconfigured. It could be that the authorization mechanisms in the single sign-on environment are incorrect, or it could be that something has gone wrong in the DNS system or the cloud implementation of some of the portions of the application. How do you know where the problem is? The only way you can reliably determine where the issues are is if you have a meaningful standardized certification metric by which you can measure the environments. When you can do that, you can then much more easily determine where the root cause of the problem is and remediate it as quickly as possible. One of the areas in the MEF where we as a company and many of the partner companies have been involved in describing the certification and standardization of acceptability is in SD-WAN. And SD-WAN is more than just a security consideration, but it certainly has security components that are of interest to us. As enterprises move towards adopting SD-WAN to streamline their operations, particularly in a COVID world or a post-COVID world where more and more of our workforce is working remotely, less and less of our people are actually coming into the office and using the local infrastructure, SD-WAN becomes critically important to how we do business as an enterprise community. It also offers significant business opportunity to the telco operators that are delivering those services, turning them up, streamlining the approach as enterprises adopt these types of technologies that allow them to operate in a more remote and distributed fashion. But SD-WAN is complicated. It's very difficult to deploy and turn up on a large-scale, geographically dispersed environment. So the MEF has gotten into the business of delivering certifications that allow enterprises and service providers to certify and know that a system complies with both its basic capabilities and its security capabilities pre-deployment. For us, that's just the beginning of the story of why security standards and certifications are important, because pre-deployment is a significant problem, but post-deployment problem resolution and the assurance of how an SD-WAN platform is operating is also critically important to the enterprises that use them and the telcos that offer those services as part of their business. You think about what I said before in terms of fault remediation. In the SD-WAN landscape, there are a host of things that present themselves as challenges in terms of trying to understand when something is not behaving correctly, whether it's application performance, whether it's some kind of a security problem, an incursion into the environment. It's very difficult, especially when you consider that in the majority of circumstances, everything end-to-end is encrypted with mutual TLS or some other mechanism of VPN tunnels like IPsec. When you realize that we are connecting everything together in a highly distributed manner and encrypting everything, how do you introspect and determine whether everything is operating correctly? You really only have one chance of doing that, and that is by introspecting the endpoints that are connected together and delivering the data and the transmission and the application connections through the environment. And in order to do that in a highly distributed manner, you have to have a standards by which you are going to try and tackle that problem. One of the reasons that this is difficult is the SD-WAN stack itself is incredibly complex. It starts with user traffic. It might have different configurations on a site-by-site basis. It may be coming into a provider core where it is operated by a variety of different virtual network functions that all take policy directives depending on their capability from a different portion of the network. When you think about that, it's unbelievable to imagine how are you going to take something that's a 5,000 site deployment and understand whether or not you can turn it up reliably, and then after you've turned it up, how are you going to manage it in a robust way and ensure that the security policies associated with it are acting as you would expect them to? The only way you can do this is if you have built that capability into your practice and that you certify not just at the beginning, but in a continuous fashion, you determine that your operating environment and the policies that have been deployed against it are in fact operating as you would expect, meeting your policies, keeping you secure. Absent a certification or a standard that allows you to do that, it's very difficult for even the largest of enterprises to codify that in a meaningful way and operate a practice that will allow them to remain secure. In the MEF, there are a host of certification initiatives and standards initiatives that read on this. Whether it's MEF-88, which is the application security for SD-WAN, which is something that we as a company have been focused on the development of, the building out the specification itself, and building matched and complementary controls in our product offering that allow companies to certify their platforms. The folks that build the SD-WAN solutions allow telco operators to certify what they're onboarding and to ensure that they know from the beginning that the security controls that are built into the system are robust and resistant to attack in the face of an ever-changing threat landscape, which is why those certifications are important in the beginning, but they're important to operate on a regular basis so that you know in a continual sense whether or not something has changed that needs to be remediated. SD-WAN itself is effectively just the first in a cloud-based security model of a continuum that goes through Secure Access Service Edge, which is SASE, and then to Zero Trust, which is a mechanism whereby everything in terms of communication is authorized only by a cryptographic handshake where known entities communicate. Zero Trust itself is important simply because the expected and default model of security for the last 20 years has been that we allow everything to connect until it misbehaves. That's really not a way to secure your environment. The technology has existed for more than a decade to get to a more granular capability that allows only things, endpoints, users, application components to connect with each other that are authorized to from the beginning. And so we look at SD-WAN as a proof point of a security model that will allow us to evolve to SASE and ultimately to Zero Trust in the marketplace. And we believe this is absolutely the way that both the industry is headed and the way that it should be headed in order to fend off the various attack vectors that we are constantly having to deal with. Just a note on SASE itself. If you think about it, it sounds like it's a new thing, right? Gartner coined the term in 2019. Secure Access Service Edge sounds pretty straightforward. But if you look under the covers, it's made up of a host of security technologies that are coming together to provide a more cohesive outcome from a security perspective, whether it's CASB, whether it's next-gen firewall, whether it's SD-WAN, all the Wi-Fi security, CDN capabilities deployed in the data center, at the edge, in SaaS environments against mobile devices, and in the cloud. You can see that this kind of granular and powerful evolutionary approach is both important, but really challenging in order to standardize. Thankfully, the MEF is working on that. Today, we as a company have taken some of the specifications in the MEF and we've deployed use cases that are available now from an SD-WAN perspective. But in addition to that, we are active and working with the community to build the complementary evolution of those security certifications, whether it's MEF-88 or others, to apply to the SASE model that the community is building very aggressively now in the marketplace. In the end, our security solutions are only going to be as powerful and as strong as the people that participate in making sure that they are. And so in closing, my invitation to you, if you're watching this and you've stayed with me through the entire conversation, is to get involved. We need more security pros. We need more analyst perspective. We need more enterprise and developer expertise so that we get the standards right, so that they deliver the value that they are intended to deliver to the marketplace, so that we, our customers, our partners, our community can operate as securely as possible. I want to thank the MEF for an opportunity to speak with all of you today. It's an important topic. I welcome the conversation, and I look forward to continuing it with you all. Thank you.